Everybody, welcome to the Customer Success webinar series. I'm Scott Slomba, Head of Customer Success here at Komprise. And with me today, I have two presenters, Paul Chen, who's the head of our product management team, and we have Darren Cunningham, head of marketing. And today we're going to talk about elastic replication. Before we get going, there's a couple logistics. Darren, did you show the slides up there?
Yep.
I lost the slides. Yeah, so some logistics before we get going here. So if you haven't figured it out, on the upper right-hand corner, there should be a like a bracket icon there to go to full screen for better viewing experience. There's also some other materials that you should find interesting with where the paperclip is. We do encourage questions being asked. It really helps enrich the webinar. So there's a question mark button there. You'll need to ask questions via chat. You can't go audio through chat. So I'll be monitoring the chat box for questions, and I'll try and get them in there as we go. We always reserve time at the end of the webinar for questions, to catch up on questions. And then speaking of questions, every webinar I'm always asked, do we record these sessions? And we do. And they are sitting right here at komprise.com/techcrunch. And we've been doing this for a while now, so the library has actually grown. We have a couple dozen out there, a lot of great material, content. I highly encourage you to go check it out. And there's one other thing in here that's not listed is we're going to do a few polls today. So you should also see a poll button on the right-hand side, and we'll call that out when it's time to do so. So today, pretty simple agenda. We're going to talk about elastic replication, what it is, what we're finding with customers as we talk to them. And then we're going to do a demonstration. And then, of course, we're always looking for new content. What do you guys want to see? So please, if anything comes to mind during the webinar, just chime out in the chat, and we'll take note and try and get those in future webinars coming up. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Darren.
Yeah, hi, everybody. Thanks, Scott. I actually launched the poll question, which is, what data protection strategies do you have in place today for unstructured data? It'd be good to get some real-time feedback. So what we've heard over the last few months, and the reason why I'm kind of setting this up is I've been working closely with our product management team, helping kind of broker a number of customer sessions where we've asked our customers about key initiatives that we're prioritizing. One of which is what we're going to talk about today, which is a replication. And what we've heard is a few things. One is we need to improve cyber resiliency against disasters and ransomware attacks, right? It just makes sense. We all follow the news. We know how important DR is and the frequency of these ransomware attacks. So everybody's looking for new strategies to make sure that all of their data is protected. One thing that we hear often is we have so much unstructured data. It's growing so fast. We can't afford to keep it all protected. So there's lots of data that you'd like to protect. Is just too cost prohibitive. So especially when it comes to NAS mirroring. So that's one thing that we heard. And a lot of our customers started asking us, hey, we're using you for migration. We're using you for tiering, ongoing lifecycle management. Can you help us deliver a broader disaster recovery coverage and data protection at a lower cost? So that's really that sentiment's been what's driving what we're going to cover today. Can you help us right-place data to less expensive cloud or object or file destinations? Right-size data at the share level, not just the directory level, right? So getting more specific about what types of data you can move and where. And then can you enable file recovery with fidelity even from object storage? So those are some of the things we've heard, and you're going to hear how we're thinking about those going forward. And it's interesting, in the poll question, we didn't get a huge amount of folks responding, but total NAS mirroring seems to be the most common, and then some limited NAS mirroring as well. So that's what we want to talk about today. When it comes to your non-mission critical data, your unstructured data that might be left unprotected, can we help you come up with more cost-effective strategies? So let's go into what we've announced, and then Paul's going to preview some really interesting things that will show you where we're going next.
Right. Thanks, Darren. And very interesting information on that poll. The fact that customers are already doing limited NAS mirroring just, again, corroborates what we're hearing across the board. It's great when it works, and it's expensive, so it can't be used everywhere. What we have announced already is the use of our Elastic Migration Engine, which is the fastest file-to-file migration product out on the market. We updated it to enable migration of files to objects. Currently, it's built for NFS files to S3 objects, and we maintain the fidelity of NFS files when they land as S3 objects. In other words, we copy all the NFS POSIX metadata and we store it with the object. And so if that object needs to be rehydrated back to file, we have all the metadata, and those files, when restored, are exactly the way they were when they were originally replicated. So we're using this capability to now start our journey towards a full Elastic replication feature, but you can get started today using our Elastic Migration Engine and migrate either from file to file or file to object as well. We have released this already because some customers have been asking us not only for the DR use case, but even for what they call an offline archive, where they want entire directories, which are usually project-based. They don't need those files on premises anymore. They don't need links to them either. So the tiering isn't necessary. They just want us to essentially copy all that data to another cheaper location. So it's an archive of complete directories or shares. Gives them very fine-grained control, since we can go down to the directory level instead of having to do an entire volume. And again, we're using this Elastic migration as our foray into a snapshot-based replication. We do already now support snapshot-based migration. So that's a capability we've just added and announced. That allows snapshot-based replication, and now you can replicate files to S3 and therefore preserve that point-in-time version of a directory or even an entire share as objects. I'll let Darren speak to this sort of competitive.
Yeah, we put together this, and we'd love to get your feedback on it. But we know, we're not trying to go and be a synchronous replication solution. Back to the point about, hey, NAS mirroring is too expensive, or maybe there's some of our data that is non-mission critical that we need a replication strategy for. So when you look at kind of what I would define as kind of best in class replication NAS mirroring, it's typically entire volume only. You need an identical infrastructure to mirror, right? It's near instantaneous and synchronous, usually very expensive, and ideal for mission critical volumes. So we're looking to make sure it's clear that we're kind of contrasting with what we're moving towards with Komprise Elastic Replication, where the scope is being able to select shares and directories to replicate. So much more fine-grained choices. The ability to then select object, file, destination per source is a big feature request we've had from customers. It's the recovery point is not instantaneous. It's asynchronous replication. Really important to emphasize that, which will result in a much lower cost and ultimately cost savings for you, and ideal for non-mission critical unstructured data. So this chart's really important to frame what you're going to see next in the demonstration, and help you compare and contrast to some of the approaches you're already using. We're not saying, hey, go and rip them out and replace them with Komprise, but we think there's a lot of data out there that this will be very useful for and can help you with overall cost savings. And the next table actually goes into a little more details. Do you want to cover this one, Paul?
Sure. One of the primary drivers for customers needing this solution that we can provide is cost. The NAS mirroring works great, but it's extremely expensive. And with the amount of unstructured data that our customers have, they cannot afford to have that much replicated hardware. And the software itself, the licensing cost for the solution is also very expensive. So here we've got a table, and assume you have X amount of data. Generally, the snapshots will add about 30% overhead. So factor that in. If you look at the first column, we're showing what types of data would reside across that X that you've got. Now, the top row is the data that requires rapid recovery. So generally, you want to use file-to-file replication. So in the event of a disaster or a malware attack, you can quickly cut over users from the now disabled or attacked source, get your users using the file-based replication copy. So the RTO is very, very low. And then that allows users to have business continuity without any lapse. So that usually accounts to, we estimate, about 1/5, 20% of the data that you've got. And of course, if you're using a NAS mirroring, you're paying exactly that same cost on the other side for the identical hardware. With Komprise, it would be cheaper. We're being very conservative here and saying, yeah, maybe worst case, you're using some other tool and you have the same cost. But if you use Komprise to do file-to-file replication, even that cost would be lower than the 20%X. The second row is data that's sort of non-mission critical, maybe today is not even covered. It's not even protected. And so this kind of data that's not requiring rapid recovery, but you would still like to have disaster recovery copies for, makes up the bulk of the data, maybe 60% or so. And again, if you were to use your NAS mirroring solution on that, you're looking at 0.6x, duplicating the hardware again with the NAS mirroring solution. Whereas with Komprise, we can help you make replication copies of those files in object storage, whether on-prem or in the cloud. And as you all know, object storage is very, very much cheaper than file storage, especially files in the cloud. So we've got a number there of about 0.09x for the low cost of replicating all that other unstructured, non-mission critical data to the cloud. And then maybe there's 20% that you decide you don't need disaster recovery at all for whatever reason. We're being conservative here too. And so of course you don't need to replicate those with the Komprise solution. We allow you to pick and choose. So there's no cost involved if you use Komprise Elastic Replication. Of course, with a NAS mirroring, you don't have a choice. It's the entire volume. So everything goes. So you would still pay the 20%X for that. And same thing with the snapshots. If you're using NAS mirroring, they're on the volume. And so they go as well. And now you've got the snapshots replicated. You may not necessarily need that. And again, with Komprise, you have the option to pick and choose what to replicate. You don't want those snapshots, the cost is zero. So if you just add it up, very rough back of the envelope, we're approximately saving 77% of the cost of replication and affording you the ability to actually replicate all your data. We've had customers tell us, yeah, I feel very comfortable about the stuff I've got my NAS mirroring on. I'm perfectly covered. But we have stuff that, for compliance reasons, governance, we are supposed to be backing up, and we don't have a plan. This makes me very nervous, not only from the fact that if there is a disaster, we could be in trouble, but disasters are fairly few and far in between. It's more the governance and compliance that's a daily thing that he says keeps him up at night. So the fact that we'll have the solution available to him made him very interested and very eager to try it out.
Hey, Paul, so I know a lot of people join these to get to the demo, right? We want to spend a lot of time in demos. So we saw a lot of folks join in late. So two things. One is maybe while you're setting this up, I did launch another poll. So what is your primary unstructured data replication priority? It'd be just interesting to hear from people who are watching this live to tell us, what is that, what are those priorities? And maybe there's something else that we're not here. You can add that's not here. You can add to the questions. And then speaking of which, we do want to encourage some questions. So if you have them, bring them in. But I think if you missed the preface, we're going to show you some things that are coming on the roadmap. It's a pretty cool demo, but it's not in the current release. Some of the UI elements, but they are coming. So definitely want to get your feedback, and we're about to show you some really cool stuff.
Right. So just a quick word on before I show what's coming in the future. What we have today is our Elastic Data Migration Engine that does, of course, always do file-to-file migration and replication, but now can do file-to-object, NFS to S3. So that's very interesting, and that is available today, and also with snapshots on the source. So Komprise will manage snapshots on your source file servers, and that way you can get a point-in-time copy on your destination, whether it's file or whether it's S3. So that exists today. You can get started. What we're planning for later this year is expanding that capability to be actually a full replication set. So the file to object currently only supports NFS to S3. We're going to build that out to also support SMB to S3. And then very popular other object storage format is Azure. So we'll add support for Microsoft Azure as well, those blobs. Failover and failback, very important features for a replication capability. So we have already designed that and we're looking to implement it. And then there'll be a new user interface as well. It'll show up in the user interface separate from the migration tab, different use case, different controls. And that's what I'm going to preview very shortly. The availability, again, it'll be included for now, initially, in the full suite license. We'll see how it goes. And then if you're interested in getting started as we roll out the new capabilities, just let us know, contact your account team, contact your customer success representative. So with that, I will quickly now cut to the actual demo.
One thing that we're learning is that our audience isn't great or big fans of polls. But if you want to do, there's still time to take this one while you're cutting over.
Very good. So Darren will keep the poll open, and it's the little bar chart icon if you want to find where to get to it on the right side. So again, this is a screenshot demo. These are mock-ups that we've given to engineering, and they are going to be implementing it, but I'm giving you a preview of what it will look like. For those of you who are already Komprise customers, you're already familiar with the basic user interface. At the top, we have our menu bar, and you'll notice now a new entry here called Replicate. So along with Migrate, along with Plan, along with Deep Analytics, there'll be a new capability. When you click there, you get an interface that should also look very familiar if you've ever used Komprise to do file-based migration. You get a table of all your ongoing replications that you've set up, some basic summary information about each one. You have some high-level numbers at top giving you a summary of how many replications are going on, how many are stopped. So this lets you know that maybe you need to start those again. Just a reminder, one is done, it succeeded, and if there are any errors, you would see those as well. So to get started, it's very simple. It's a wizard-based interface, just like with migration. To add a replication, you basically tell us, what do you want us to replicate? And so you select your source. All your sources will be available here in a scroll down. In this particular case, we'll replicate this engineering true NAS. Probably not mission critical. There's some QA information here, some test data, but we'll pick that share. We can go even further, however, and actually pick specific directories. So I may want to go down to the engineering system directory and replicate this. So I get very fine-grained control on what I can replicate. Then I say, where should that data be replicated to? And then here again, I get the choices of all the storage that Komprise knows about. In this case, I'll be replicating file to object. So I've got an AWS bucket in an account in AWS. I'll select that bucket. Now, what Komprise will automatically do is create two prefixes at the root of that bucket. So we're going to basically do a tick-tock model. We'll have one full copy going into a prefix called copy A. And then when that copy is completed, that will be your replication destination. In the next iteration, whether you've set it for 4 hours later or 12 hours later or the next day, then we'll do another full copy into the second location, copy B. And after that, it's just tick-tock, tick-tock. We just keep updating copy A with new files there, copy B with new files there. The reason for that is you've always got a safe replication copy in case of a disaster or a ransomware attack. Meanwhile, when an iteration is running, we are copying new files into the other area. So we have this model. You then schedule the replication. You can pick your schedule, run every days. We have down to hours. You can go up to weeks or months, depends on how often the data changes and how much you want to protect it. You can pick exactly the time zone where the storage happens to be. So if you're the admin in New York, but you're trying to protect storage in Argentina or in Paris, you have exact control over when Komprise should run the replications. Obviously, you want that in off hours when fewer changes are happening. You give it a name. We will provide a default name based on the source and destination. You're at perfect, you can change it to whatever you would like. Perfect freedom there. There may be some settings that are interesting. One of them is validating the data transfer. Now, Komprise Elastic Migration will always validate data transfers for file to file. However, whenever we copy into the cloud, and remember I've chosen an Amazon bucket as my destination for the replication, we don't automatically validate because of the costs that are involved. For us to read back the object out of S3 to generate its checksum would incur an egress fee for you. Now, if you do want that additional protection, you can definitely enable it. And we'll let you know that this may incur extra costs. You're at perfect freedom to decide what you want to protect or not. Finally, you review all your settings and you say go. And now that replication is set up. You see it now at the top of the table. It's pending its first run based on the schedule. Meanwhile, I can click into each particular replication and I get a details page. Very similar again to our current migration user interface. There's a details page for each replication run. If there were a recovery copy, I would have that information right up front, right at the top. So this is the easy information that you'll need in case there's a crash on your file server or there's a malware attack. You need to cut over your users. You need to know where to cut them over to. And that information would be here. But since this job just started, I get information about what I'm protecting and where I'm protecting it to. Again, you see the TikTok copy A, copy B. And I can see here the actual run information. So I don't have a recovery copy yet. We've just started. Copy A is running. It's copying files. If I open these sections, I can see exactly how much information we've scanned, how much is being copied over, if there are any errors, and echoing my settings. So a wealth of information available for each replication. Of course, you can download a report. Meanwhile, after this is run for a while, it will complete and we'll get a nice recovery copy at copy A. So I get a notification that's succeeded. I get the information about the time and date of that snapshot that now exists on my copy A. I can see how old it is. But again, right at the top, I have that important information. If my source were to go down, that engineering true NAS with that directory I'm copying, I can point my users exactly to this particular data store and this particular path to get them working with an RTO of very, very low, basically just the DNS change time. So that important information is there. Meanwhile, the next time this iteration runs, it'll now copy into the copy B prefix on the bucket. And so I'm preserving my copy A as a nice recovery copy, and I'll be updating copy B. And over time, we'll see that the last status of that particular replication that succeeded. I now have a nice recovery copy. It's this old. Meanwhile, the next scheduled run is at this particular time. So that's a preview of the user interface that's coming. I'll switch back to the slides.
Hey, Paul, maybe I wonder if you can switch into the current UI of the product for a minute, because I was wondering about, you mentioned data stores and how this would show up. Would there be any actions you could take from the data stores tab or any analytics that would be interesting for replication in the same way that you see analytics around data tiered and things like that in our data stores interface?
Sure. Let me bring up a demo and I'll switch back to my screen there.
And there's also a question while you're doing that. With the copy we were seeing, does it copy every file or changed files?
Great question. So those initial baselines, one baseline for copy A and one baseline for copy B, obviously those need to be full copies. Every file needs to get over for the replication recovery copy. But after that, for each succeeding iteration to each successive copy, either copy A or copy B, it's just the delta, just the same way we do with migration now. We compare the update times on the source versus the times that we have on the destination. And if the file hasn't changed, we don't copy it over. So it can be very fast. One of the nuances that we're planning to implement, the enhancements, is sort of a changeless snapdiff kind of implementation where the file server provides that information. We can integrate to it and therefore potentially even speed up those successive iterations even faster. It's a great question. That allows you to schedule your replications at a very, very quick pace on the matter of hours even, if you like, depending on how much data and the change rate that you expect. But since we're only copying the changes, it can be much faster.
Great. And maybe when you're showing what's in 5.5, you can highlight some of the snapshot capabilities and some of the functionality that's new there.
Right, exactly. So here I've got a demo. This is live code. It's version 5.5, which is the latest version that's out there. It is working on a simulation of data. So all the data that comes back is fake. I don't have 4 petabytes of data that I can play with. But this is the new data stores tab that was released in the 5.0 product. So in the entire 5.x line, it's available. You can see information about all your shares and file servers. In fact, we now show clusters as first-class citizens in the hierarchy, and then you've got your access zones. If it's an Isilon, if it's a NetApp cluster, then we show the SVMs underneath, and then you finally get to your shares. And we have a directory explorer now also available in data stores, so you can navigate down to directories and subdirectories as far down as you need to go. So you can get a good idea of your data even before you set up your migrations or your replications. So you can use this information to decide what information I've got and figure out, oh, what is mission critical, should already be covered, or I may want to use file-to-file migration to cover those. What's non-mission critical, and I can now use file to object. So some of these older directories, HR archive might be a prime candidate for replicating file to object. So the data source gives you a lot of that information. Then currently on the migration tab, this is our Elastic migration. Again, very similar user interface. When you add a migration, you can now decide whether or not you want to use a snapshot. So we have this capability. It's an advanced option. Most of the time, our customers want to migrate live file systems. They want all the latest changes. But in case they do want a point-in-time copy on the destination, you now have this ability to use a snapshot on your source. And this is exactly the capability that you can use today. And it will be available also in the Elastic replication.
Great. Thanks. Any other questions coming in, Scott?
No, right now Lee has the prize for the best question, as well as the most questions, and he wins the prize for the first question.
Whoops. Nice. I was going back to this. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
The recommendations. Yeah, so we're at the bottom of the hour here. I think the first step is the things that Paul just showed with data migration, file to object migration, snapshot-based migration. Can you give us a use case or where is the file to object use case coming from, Paul? Is that common or is it pretty unique?
It's getting more and more common. So that was the reason that we did build it and release it earlier this year. Originally, years ago, customers were fine with file-to-file migration, but now they have this use case, which they call an offline archive. So they want to identify certain projects which are entirely completed, whether maybe it's a chip design, maybe it's an insurance case, maybe it's a medical history, maybe it's a research project. It's completed. It comprises a bunch of files, usually well organized into a set of directories. And they just want to get all that data off the primary storage. No one needs to look at it for some time into the future. Can we migrate it over to object, which is very inexpensive? In fact, they can choose with Komprise which object storage class they would like to use. It doesn't have to be the warmest. It can be a cooler one or even an archive, a Glacier or an Azure archive tier, where it's very cold and it's very cheap. And that way they don't lose the data. It's removed from their primary storage, so it's not occupying expensive storage space. But if it ever needs to be returned, Komprise can just migrate it back with full fidelity. And so that's a great use case that customers are finding for the file to object.
Awesome. Looks like we have another question from Lee. Also, I will let you know the answer, 66% of you, when asked, what is your primary unstructured data replication priority? The answer was right sizing at the share level or directory level and right placing to less expensive cloud or object file destination. So good. And Lee's question is, will using the snapshot copy, or when using the snapshot copy, will that get around the issue of illegal characters in user file names?
So since we're taking a snapshot, obviously those aren't editable. And as we read those files and try to copy them for the replication recovery copy, we may encounter errors. So Lee, your point is well taken. It could be illegal characters in user file names. It could be any number of other issues. All the same error mechanisms that exist in our migration engine today will catch those and flag them. There will be error logs that are available, so you can see exactly which files we were not able to copy over. Sometimes there may be illegal characters. Sometimes the file's been munged. We've had cases where somehow the file got obfuscated or corrupted and we could not read it. So those will be identified and you'll be able to find them in the error log.
All right. So I think, Scott, I'll give you the microphone for final word.
Yeah, well, last call for questions. We'll hang out for a little bit here. Again, Lee still has the prize for the best question and the most. And then, as I said earlier, we're always looking for topics. So, send something in the question chat right here now, or send a note to your CSM. Be happy to accommodate. And then finally, this will be recorded. So, on here, we've got to actually post this in the support portal, as well as the website, the URL we showed you earlier in this presentation, komprise.com/techcrunch.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. We also have a YouTube channel if you're more inclined to watch things there. You can check us out there, but we definitely want to make these useful for you. So do let us know what topics would be most interesting as we're seeing, growing adoption of things like deep analytics. We've run 3 or 4 specifically on deep analytics and setting up user roles and things like that. So let us know what would be most useful for you. And these are for customers, and some partners tend to join as well. So thanks, Paul, for taking us through what's coming. And we really are excited about this replication use case. One quick question. Lee goes for another. So you can't copy a NetApp snapshot. Is that accurate statement, Paul?
We have integrated with NetApp, so we would take our own snapshots. Again, if the customer has snapshots going on their own schedule, that's great. We don't interfere. Komprise will manage our own snapshots, and we can and already do manage NetApp snapshots.
All right, cool. And speaking of partners like NetApp, we are actually announcing that we will be at Pure Accelerate in Vegas in June. So we hope to see you there, if not sooner. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Bye.
Bye.